We are live. Hi, everyone. Just give a second for everyone to join us here. I'm super excited you guys are tuning in. All right. Sweet. All right, so hello and welcome everyone to our 9th live stream for the Empowerment Podium. For those of you guys that are returning, welcome back. And for those that are new here, I want to welcome you. I'm so glad that you guys are joining us today, and I really hope that you will stick around. You can join this community by subscribing to this channel, following us on Instagram and TikTok, and liking us on Facebook. The links to those socials are in the description down below. Now, I just want to say I am extra excited for today's speaker. Today we'll be following the same Q&A format we tried out with Samuel the other day. So So I'm hoping that it will make for a good discussion. And if you want to get in on the Q&A and have a question for today's speaker, please feel free to submit any questions that you have in the chat, and we will try our best to get to those during our discussion. So, without further ado, I want to present today's speaker. Today we are joined by Bishoy Tadros. Bishoy is the author of Break Barriers, How Setbacks Can Dare You Rather Than Define You. And he has mounted a professional career across industries and worked for titans such as JP Morgan and currently Salesforce. Born in Egypt, Bishoy holds an undergraduate degree from SUNY Geneseo with an MBA from Fordham University in Finance and Management. Bishoy immigrated to the U.S. when he was 3 years old upon being diagnosed with leukemia. He underwent treatment for most of his childhood and ultimately received a clean bill of health at the age of 13. Bishoy rarely spoke about his entire childhood experience until 2017, when he shared his story to fundraise for the New York City Marathon. His story took off and he raised $50,000 for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Bishoy uncovered the power of his narrative, and with no literary background or experience whatsoever, he set out to share his story. And in under a year, he struck a disciplined writing schedule, all while working a full-time job, and he published Breaking Barriers, with the objective of giving readers a tool to channel the mindset to overcome obstacles, whether they be personal, professional, or on the playing field. Bishoy is also an Ironman and a 3-time marathoner, and he has raised nearly $100,000 to date for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. So with that, I want to get into our discussion. Welcome, Bishoy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, not wasting any time, I think let's just start from the beginning. To quote an excerpt from your book, on the outside, I was like every other 4-year-old. I had no idea what cancer was or the real reason my parents had uprooted our family and moved to America. They did it for me to find a cure before it was too late. Can you just tell us a little bit about where your personal journey began?
Yeah, in fact, the very first chapter of the book dives right into it in the sense that I really was just like every other child. I only wanted to play, only wanted to make friends, only wanted to explore. There was really nothing different about me, at the heart. It was just what was going on from a physical perspective. And so, throughout my childhood, that was a constant question I'd have to ask myself is, I want to do everything everybody else wants to do, but why am I having so much trouble doing it? Mm-hmm. And my parents did a really good job at the time, cultivating an environment where I didn't feel, completely polarized and left out. Mm-hmm. But, there are certain things that no matter how much a parent can try, as a child, something is wrong. And I knew something was wrong. And so that was the child that I had summoned at various points in my adult life, mm-hmm. To help navigate, different obstacles on different fronts.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like such a crazy experience, like a whirlwind experience, to suddenly just uproot your entire life from Egypt to the U.S., which I'm sure is just like a crazy culture shock and totally different. So it's really quite amazing that your parents did that for you, and clearly it was definitely the right decision as you're sitting here with us today. So that's incredible. So it seems, as I was rattling off like your multitudes of accomplishments, but it seems like you do not let any setbacks keep you down. In fact, they seem to dare you to do more, as your book title suggests. So I know that you have completed the TCS New York City Marathon, for example, and then also completed 2 other marathons. You're an Ironman. So can you tell us a little bit more about your running journey and any other instances where you've allowed setbacks to really dare you rather than define you?
Absolutely. So, going through what I went through as a child, between the ages of 3 and 13, aside from just wanting to play, as a young boy, I wanted to compete and I wanted to play sports. And, for one reason or another, due to the medication and due to the treatment, I was just a lot slower than a lot of the other boys out there. And it was something that always held me back. And so I had the competitive spirit in me. I had the edge, but I didn't necessarily understand why. I just couldn't keep up. And, it was something that was definitely an insecurity of mine headed into high school, because, again, I didn't really start life until I was headed into high school.
Yep.
And so I had made it a point going into high school. I went to a big Friday night light type of school on Long Island. I really wanted to play football, only because I really wanted that jersey, because all the cool kids had the jersey. And of course, given my background, I was in no position to be on a football field at 14. I was frail, or I wasn't in shape. I hadn't been running around as much as the other kids. And I was the kid that got cut from the team that didn't cut anybody, because it was where I was physically at that point. And I talk about my senior year in high school where, I finally made the team and I finally got to wear that jersey. And so in the book, I talk about my progression from, being told over and over again that I don't belong on this field, or I can't run as fast as these kids on the court, to never giving up, continuing to show up, even if you were the kid that got cut over and over again, because it was just about showing up for yourself at times. And so I'm going to fast forward a couple of years now into my 20s, and I never really had a solid footing from a fitness perspective, because it was always me just kind of chasing what I felt I missed out on. And so finally I had built a base professionally where I was able to give a little bit more time to something that I think I was putting on the side for a little bit. And so I was in New York City. I was working for JP Morgan at the time, and I had made it a point to start re-engaging with my fitness journey. And I had a friend that opened up a spin studio. It was a part of the big boutique fitness burst that happened in New York at the time. And I started taking these spin classes, and I started to peek around at the people around me, and I noticed that the community of people that were going there consistently were a little bit of a different breed. They were, definitely more well-rounded when it came to their discipline from a fitness perspective. And I made that conscious decision to say, Bishoy, you need to find people like this and surround yourself with these people, because they're going to help you get to where you want to go. And so I started attending these 6 a.m. classes pretty regularly, and I started to soak in the community. And I realized that I was around all these former college athletes, some pro athletes even, and somehow, just out of pure focus and determination, I was figuring out a way to keep up with them, not because I had the physical acumen necessarily that they did. And so in engaging with these people over time, I decided, okay, I'm going to continue to surround myself with people that are smarter, faster, stronger than me, people that know what they're doing, and I'm going to do what they tell me to do. And so I started picking up a lot of them were runners, and I started engaging with them. It was definitely, a scary thing, because I wasn't a fast runner. I couldn't run a mile. I even talk about the first time I ran a mile in my book, and I break down the lessons of that. But I'll, long story short, eventually built up the courage to run my first half marathon, which ultimately turned into about 12 other half marathons.
Oh my gosh.
Until I finally took the leap to do a little bit more. And so it's a process. It always was a process. And the number one piece of advice that I got out of this whole journey was around that first mile that I ran with my old roommate, who happened to be a college runner. I thought I was just going out for a casual run with a friend. Mm-hmm. And as we were running down on the West Side Highway in New York, not knowing what I was doing, I found myself sprinting, stopping, sprinting, stopping, sprinting, stopping. And
Pace yourself. Yeah.
He pulled me aside and he goes, listen, man, I don't know what you're doing out here, but if there's one piece of advice that I could give you, it's that you can run as slow as you want, but whatever you do, don't stop. Mm-hmm. And I talk about how that one piece of advice that was meant to be, a piece of guidance for someone that wasn't really a runner, ended up transcending running. And it ended up becoming a piece of advice that I took with me for up until this date is something that I kind of hold true with everything that I do. Whatever it is that you want to do in life, you can go as slow as you want. Just don't stop.
I love that. It's like a true tortoise and the hare kind of story. Slow and steady wins the race. It does ring true, and I totally agree with that sentiment.
And, essentially for anyone that's a prospective runner out there, that's how you build the ability to run 26 miles. It's not about waking up and running 26 miles. Yeah. It's about running as slow as you need to run and adding on increments of distance over time. So if you run 1 mile today, run 1.5 miles tomorrow. And just continue to build it up.
Wow. Yeah. No, I love that. And I think it's real. From someone who's not a naturally gifted runner, I think it's very inspiring, the amount of running that you've been able to do. And I think it's clear that, that even though you didn't start out as an athlete, it wasn't in you from a young age, you've truly been able to transform into one based off who you've surrounded yourself with and, being that slow and steady kind of pace. So I think that's really inspiring. Hopefully I should definitely get out there and do some more running. So kind of building off of that, what virtues do you find the most helpful to apply when you're chasing your dreams? Whether it's
so my formula is the 3 P's: patience, perspective, and purpose. And I talk about them in my book. I talk about them on my YouTube channel. It is my formula for everything from fitness to work to even my love life, and how me and my wife ended up getting together over time. And these were the 3 virtues that I had essentially ingrained in myself as a child, because of what I had gone through. So patience being the idea that you don't see the results you want when you want them. As a kid undergoing treatment, I was constantly given negative results, even though I just wanted to play, right? And I couldn't because of what was going on. Perspective was the idea that things happen for a reason. And, a lot of times my parents summoned me to believe that I was given that burden to carry because I was, built to carry it. And so anytime something comes my way, whether it's some sort of obstacle or roadblock in any arena of my life, I take it more as an opportunity. And really, I'm grateful for those obstacles because it means that the universe is telling me that, hey, you're here because you were meant to handle this. We didn't give this obstacle to some chump who wasn't built to handle. We're giving it to you. And then purpose is the idea that life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And it's really important to seek out those moments of discomfort in order to unleash your potential. And so, again, looking back on everything that happened, it's easy to, feel bad for someone going through that kind of situation. And even at the time, I'm sure I felt bad for myself. But looking back on it, it was truthfully a blessing of sorts because it's given me my life's mission. And so an uncomfortable moment brought out, something that I didn't know was within.
Yeah. I love that. The 3 P's, easy to remember: patience, perspective, and perseverance. That's good takeaway for sure. All right. So you fairly recently became a published author, as we've kind of touched on, releasing Breaking Barriers, How Setbacks Can Dare You Rather Than Define You. So I'm curious, what made you to decide to write about your experiences, and did you learn anything about yourself during that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So the very first time I had ever released this story was in 2017. I like you mentioned earlier, I decided to run the marathon.
Yep.
And I had to raise money for charity. And so I wrote down my story on a one-pager, and actually I put it in a drawer and I almost never shared it. I was a little vulnerable at the time because I had never spoken about it. A lot of my close friends didn't even know, what I had gone through. After kind of putting it aside for a couple of weeks, I decided to show it to a mentor who at the time I was just working with professionally. And, I said to him, what do you think of this? And he looked at it and he laughed and he goes, you need to make your goal a little bit higher, because it was just $3,000 at the time. He goes, make your goal $100,000 and here's $1,000, get going. Nice. And so he gave me the spark that I needed really to feel comfortable to share this story. Yeah. And so I shared it, and it did take on a life of its own. And the reason it did that was because, again, my immediate community didn't even know the story. And as the story progressed, I was getting calls from different outlets. At the time, NASDAQ reached out and I was invited to come ring the closing bell. Very cool. And that was a big opportunity for me to take fundraising to the next level. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, my story that I was scared to share became a small headline of sorts, related to the marathon at least. And I always had a passion for helping people overcome obstacles, because I felt like I had a toolkit that I wasn't sharing. And after the marathon, I got my first call to speak at a company. And, I remember thinking to myself, like, oh my God, like, does this company know they're paying me to come speak? Like, I don't really, like, it was a little bit of imposter syndrome, because I didn't feel like I really belonged there. And it was like my dream becoming a reality of, like, sharing this toolkit that I was holding on to, and for some reason I felt burdened by for so long. Yep. Anyway, at that point I had decided it was really important for me to merge what my personal and professional ambitions were going to be. And I had been working in banking for 6 or 7 years at that point. I was a little bit checked out, and I had always toyed around with the idea of writing a book, but like you mentioned, I had no idea what I was doing. I was working in finance. It's not like I had a literary background. Yeah. And so I had done what anyone else would do, and I had Googled how to write a book in December of 2018. Nice. And I Googled how many words you need to write to hit 100 pages. This is not how most authors probably write books, but my favorite number is the number 8. And so I always write down inspirational quotes that I find, and I keep them in my phone. So I took the top 8 inspirational quotes, and I just started writing under each of those quotes, to basically inspire the writing. Eventually I hit those 100 pages, and I was looking at it, and it was just a long Word document, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And I reached out to the same network that got me into, running and the triathlons and everything like that. And I was like, hey, like, someone here has got to know someone. And fortunately they did. And that person introduced me to their editor, and their editor helped me over the next 6-7 months really, form it and put it together and structure it.
Wow. That's so cool. I would never think to even do that, but I think a point that you made earlier, the imposter syndrome, but I think when you first shared your story, it must have been like, well, I've never felt the need to, like, be so open about it. But I think it truly does kind of drive the point home that it's super important to, like, share our stories and tell our stories, because you never know who they're going to impact, who they're going to resonate with, and everyone has shared experiences. I'm sure, not everyone's dealt with leukemia or anything, but I'm sure there are other kinds of setbacks and health struggles and things like that people can, kind of relate with when it comes to this. So I think that's
absolutely
awesome.
I actually, when I was writing Break Barriers, that was a huge focus of mine that I worked on with my editor. I had told him, this isn't going to be a book about leukemia patients. This isn't even going to be a book about marathon runners. Yeah. This is going to be a book for anyone that has any sort of obstacle, which is basically everybody. Yes. And so I wrote it with the intent of, doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter what you do for a living, it doesn't matter where you come from. But if you have any sort of obstacles, I want this to be your toolkit to overcoming those obstacles. And I want you to channel your version of that little boy. And really the only way you do that is by coming to terms with your story.
Yep. Yeah, no, I love that. And thank you again for sharing your story here and for sharing it in text in your book. So I've got one more for you, but I did notice that there is a quote that I really, really like from Eugene Aleto, the CEO of Bedgear, and he's also one of the praisers of your book, I noticed. And he said, "Victim or life lesson, it's a choice and it is yours to make." And I think it is so easy to fall into the trap of accepting ourselves as victims in certain scenarios, and using that as an excuse to not do certain things. So I know I've definitely fallen into that kind of trap in the past. So you've obviously proven that you take the latter life lesson path every single time. So what advice do you have for anyone out there facing a setback and how they can choose the path of life lesson?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely on point. I mean, look, mindset is everything. And what I mean by that is what's in your head is essentially your real estate. And so it's up to you as a person to make sure that you own your real estate. And so in the sense that sometimes stress and anxiety and worry could all, creep in there, it's important to stay present, meaning that the past is the past and you can't change that no matter what obstacles you had faced at that point. But what you can do is you can learn from that. And the future is the future. So when it comes to the future, the focus is on what can you control, right? What you can control is something you take charge of and you own the narrative of. But what you can't control should have no space inside your mindset to give you worry or anxiety. What it should do is it should let you lean in on perspective and the idea of, what's going to happen is what's meant to be, but what I can control, I'm going to take ownership of.
I love that. I think that's a great takeaway, staying in the present and just moving forward. I think that's a hugely important takeaway and something we can all try to practice more. Okay, so that is all the questions that we have for you today. So I believe that concludes our talk. I just want to give you another huge thank you, Bishoy, for joining us tonight and sharing your story. I think, as an author, speaker, businessman, YouTuber, Ironman, marathoner, and cancer survivor, I think you've proven that anyone can break barriers and use setbacks as motivation rather than allowing them to hold us back. So truly such an incredible story. Everyone go check out his book. I'm definitely adding it to my list. And I've also linked his website and YouTube channel down below if you want to check that out. So thank you so much, Bishoy.
Thank you.
Awesome. Now, before everyone runs off, I just want to do a couple quick shout outs. If you want to share your story just like Bishoy did today, let me know. Email us at empowermentpodium@gmail.com or message us on our socials. Like I said earlier, we've got Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, all of which you can find by searching at Empowerment Podium or at the links in the description below. So give us a follow there to stay up to date on when we'll be going live next and see some replays of our stories. If you like this stream, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. You can also hit that notification bell to receive a notification every time we post a new video or live stream. So I just want to thank you guys all again for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon for another